All right, guys, so today I wanted to explore the topic of what happened to the Titanic movie set after the release in 1997. Was it fully built? How was it constructed? And where is it today? So the number one thing that I want to address, no, during the Cameron movie, they did not rebuild a full-scale model of the Titanic. They did build a real hollowed out side of it. One side of it, they used a mirror to film the other side. So there were budget constraints. They couldn't rebuild it completely. I think in a perfect world, they would have completely rebuilt the Titanic the exact same way. It was about 90% to scale in terms of size, which is perfectly fine. You really can't tell the difference. It came out beautifully. And, back in 97, there were a lot less, CGI, things like that, made the movie a lot better and made it age extremely gracefully. But I think in a perfect world, they would have rebuilt it completely with a full interior. All of the interior shots and scenes that you see, like in the first class suites, the restaurants, the first class dining, those are all movie sets. They didn't build any type of interior to the ship. The ship is completely hollow, made of mostly wood. It was not made really all that well, so when it sank and they did the sinking scenes, especially a few different times, there were things that got destroyed. The grand staircase back in the 97 film famously, broke off and rose to the surface, and that's kind of where the whole theory came. Well, is that what happened back in 1912? Because when they went down and found the Titanic, everyone was shocked. Where is the grand staircase? And as the Titanic sunk, the wood from the grand staircase rose and floated out of the ship. Most of the bigger model was scrapped, and that was pretty much the end of it. They did save a lot of the movie sets, like Rose's first class private promenade area. That was all saved, and that's on display at different museums. And then they did auction off some of the smaller stuff from inside the different scenes, the silverware, things like that, because a lot of Titanic fans, I'm sure, would want it. But listen, could you imagine if they had the money to rebuild a full-scale replica of the Titanic? It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to move, but just a floating museum. That would have been really cool, but these are just all different photos of the different sizes that they used. A lot of different scale sizes used during the filming of the Titanic. When they shot that one scene as the Titanic is rising out of the water and you see all the first class staterooms get bombarded with water from the pressure, that was actually shot very, almost like a diorama miniature version. And that's how they filmed that scene. And the same thing with the breakup scene as it's breaking up and you see all the first class, like the first class restaurant, all the staterooms break up into two. That was all a very small, almost think like model train type scale when they were doing that. But there's a number of different Titanic models. I remember seeing a YouTube video. It probably, if it's still up, it probably has like 10 million views at this point. It was a model of the Titanic, but the scale was so impressive. It was huge, and it was a fully built version of it. And you can just see some different views. It's completely hollow. They really didn't. That's probably like the best image of the closest full-scale Titanic we're ever gonna see. Unless Titanic 2 somehow does get built. Even if it does get built, it's not going to look like that. They're going to have to put more lifeboats somewhere. That's the whole thing with the Clive Palmer model. You have to figure out a way to put lifeboats. So that's why the lifeboats were under the first class area in the Palmer model. But you can take a look at that. Again, that's probably, in terms of real life, 21st century Titanic, unless a second one gets built. The one in China, I was looking at some renderings of it. What's the point? I don't understand the point of what they're doing with that one. I get it's a floating museum. It doesn't even look like the Titanic. If you're going to build a replica Titanic, you've got to go all in. You can't build a knockoff Chinese version of it. You're building a different ship. Ships are very similar. You need to build it to the exact scale. That Chinese thing, I don't know if it's even happening. There's no updates out of China. But these are really, really cool photos. I know people see these and say, wow, they built an exact replica, but they didn't even build the other side. It is all completely hollow. There are no staterooms in there. There's nothing. It is just plywood. That's all it is. And it easily got damaged. It was not built up in any way. So when they were doing the sinking scenes, the sinking shots, it really crumbled and it was basically unusable towards the end of the film. And you're not really going to do anything with it at that point other than completely scrap it, which is what they did when it came to the big model. They built up one of the sides, the other side was hollow, and they just mirrored the shot to get both sides of the ship. And then when it comes to some of the other shots of the Titanic on the water, they used smaller scale models for those. There you can see the little model train they've got there as well. For one of the first scenes of the film as the Titanic is getting ready to leave. So that is cool as well. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the main big part of the set, which is 90%. Well, it's not even 90%. The scale of it is 90% of the real thing, but it's completely hollow on the inside, and the other side wasn't even built. That was completely scrapped, and then all of the movie sets, many of them were saved. They're on display at museums, and then they just auctioned off some of the smaller props as well. What might be even more interesting, if you guys know the film Raise the Titanic, that's a whole nother debate where they were thinking maybe after finding it in 85, do you think about raising it? It's just a horrible idea. Mainly because it would be almost impossible. I guess you could raise it. The ship is in such a state of decay, though, and it's been trapped in frigid water so far under the ocean. The cost of it would be insane. And then you also have the aspect, is it disturbing a grave? Is it disrespectful? Things like that. But they made a movie about it where they raised the thing. And they had it all in one piece because I believe that movie was made, obviously before they went down and found it in 1985 and realized it split in two and it was in two separate areas of the ocean. But when you look at the model of that one, they found it. I saw a post a while ago, probably on Reddit or one social media site, of the Raise the Titanic model completely abandoned. And it's like, dude, how did that thing not immediately get preserved into a museum? There's got to be, put it in that Las Vegas museum or whatever. That thing should have been preserved, no doubt. That is a very, very sad thing because that's a cool model. I guess it is technically inaccurate, but it's still cool. Because that's not how the Titanic really is at the bottom of the ocean. Again, this was before. The movie was made before they found it and realized it had completely broke off into two. But that is a real sad story where it just completely goes abandoned. And there was an image that kind of popped up about 10 years ago on social media, and you can see it just rotting. So either way, that is the story of the Titanic set, the biggest ship-like area that was completely hollow on the inside. As they used it during the sinking scenes, it was weak, it was poorly built, they had a lot of budget constraints, and they only built up one side of it, so it got completely scrapped. Guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.